Hey guys, so we're going to do our first introduction video for our defense in preparation for Saturday's practice. This video was an overview of all of our defensive positions and how we want you to line up before the ball is snapped and some of your basic responsibilities as well. Now, if you take a look at the board, I've got an offense lined up. It's a pretty typical balanced offense, 2 by 2 on each side, 5 linemen, and an I. What I want to do first is I want to talk about how we call strength on the field. And then secondly, I want to talk about where our 12 defensive positions line up because strength does shape it. Now, to understand the strength of the field, we need to know where the wide side of the field is. Here's what this means. Running down the middle of the field, there are hashes, 2 hashes. Whatever side the ball is put on will indicate the wide side of the field. For example, if there's 1 hash here and another hash over here, and the officials have put the ball on the left hash, then that means this side of the field is wider than this side of the field because of where the sidelines are. If that's the case, then our captain on the defense needs to call before the ball is even snapped to let the defense know where the ball is. If the ball is over here on the defense's right-hand side or the offense's left-hand side, the captain calls out, Louie, 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 telling the defense that we need to get strength to the left side. If the ball was to be placed over here on the offense's right, or the offense's right or the defense's left, then the captain would be calling out Roger, 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 and that we need to get more people over here. In the event that the ball is placed right in the middle, then the defensive captain needs to call out Louie, Louie, Louie by default. The reason for that is because if everything is balanced, offenses are more likely to run the ball to the right because we're right-hand dominant. So first thing we need to understand is where the strength of the call is going to go. Louie or Roger, because that will tell certain defenders where they should line up. Let me give you an example. We're going to put the ball on the offense's left-hand side. So that means the defense, if I'm looking at it this way, I know that the wide side of the field is here. So I'm going to call Louie, 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 Louie. And here's how we should line up against that. First, our defensive ends. Louie and Roger means nothing to you. You line up on the outside shoulders of the tackles of the tackles. Your responsibility is to reestablish the line of scrimmage, probably a yard behind the offensive lineman, and set the edge. I'll talk to you guys more later. Now, if you are the pistol, you are starting at a linebacker depth, and you are going to blitz into the B gap to strength. And again, like the defensive ends, we want you to reestablish the line of scrimmage and then look for business, which means you're basically looking for anybody to tackle. If you are the nose guard, you start in the A gap away from strength. So if it's a Louie, Louie, Louie call, nose guard, you're in the A gap to the right-hand side. And your job is to reestablish the line of scrimmage behind the offensive line. See what we've got going on here? We'll talk about this in a later video, but don't over-penetrate, just reestablish. Linebackers. If you're the Mike linebacker, the middle linebacker, Roger or Louie doesn't mean anything to you. You line up over the center, and your responsibility is this area. We'll talk more about that later. If you are the Sam linebacker, you line up to strength. So right now we've got a Louie, Louie, Louie call. You line up right here. And your responsibility is this area. We'll talk more about that later. If you're the will linebacker, you line up away from strength, which means you would be right here. And your responsibility is this area. We'll talk more about that later. So these are our initial front 7 people. Now, what about the rest of you? We're going to do things a little bit differently with our corners and halves this spring. We're going to have 2 different types of corners and 2 different types of halves. We're going to have what's called a field corner, which I'll abbreviate FC, and we're going to have a boundary corner, which we'll abbreviate BC. We'll also have a field half, which we'll abbreviate as FH, and we're going to have a boundary half, which we're going to abbreviate as BH. Those players go to a side of the field that's designated by strength. For example, if the ball is over here and the call is Louie, 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 and you are the field corner, you have to line up to strength, which means you would line up over here. If you're the field half, you would line up here. Now, why are these guys called the field half and the field corner? Because they are lining up to the wider side of the field. How do we know where the wide side of the field is? The defensive captain will call it out. Louie, 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 or Roger, Roger, Roger. Now the opposite applies to our boundary corner and our boundary half. If the boundary corner hears Louie, 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 then that boundary corner knows he's lining up over here, away from it. If the boundary half hears Louie, 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 he lines up away from it. Why are they called boundary halves and boundary corners? Because they're closer to the boundary. This is the short side of the field. This is the wide side of the field. That leaves us 1 player left, our free safety. Until we tell you differently, we want the free safety lining up 15 yards deep, and you should shade to the strength. So in this scenario, we've got a Louie, Louie, Louie call. We would want the free safety lining up right about there. If it was a Roger, Roger, Roger call, he would be lining up to the other side. Guys, think of it this way. This is really not a complicated idea. If this is the wide side of the field, teams are more likely to try to run the ball to the wide side of the field. So we want the free safety over there, and we want certain players over there. We'll talk about what these guys' roles and responsibilities are in more detail in a later video. But all we're doing by making these names and these calls of Roger and Louie is we're putting more players on the wider side of the field, which is just a smart bet. We're playing the odds. Remember our defensive philosophy. Keep everything in front of you, rally to the ball, swarm, and punish the ball carrier. Don't give up the big play. Don't miss your tackles. Okay, look for my other videos based on your individual position that I should have sent you off with this video.